Few media franchises have had as profound an impact on popular discourse as Star Trek. Between its 9 television series, 13 full-length motion pictures, and various parodies and fan productions, Trek has embedded itself into the American psyche and has become part of America's cultural mythos. Besides Trek's influence on the evolution of popular culture and measurable effect on the fields of science and technology, however, each installment in the franchise has been influenced by the political environment in which it was produced. Besides cultural norms, one of the oft-overlooked influences on Star Trek's methods of offering social commentary is U.S. foreign policy. In this video, I'll examine how the moral and ethical philosophies presented in the first 5 live-action television series, from the original series to Enterprise, were impacted by the U.S. foreign policy zeitgeist at the respective times of production. I'm leaving out the newer shows since they're still airing, and the full extent of their political impact, both internally and externally, is still, in my opinion, yet to be determined. So without further ado, this is how America's foreign policy has shaped Star Trek. The connection between Star Trek and U.S. foreign policy is one that has been noted quite frequently in academic literature. Multiple authors liken Captain Kirk to John F. Kennedy, with Rick Warland describing Trek as perhaps the ultimate Kennedy Western in his essay From the New Frontier to the Final Frontier. Warland draws further parallels between Kirk and Kennedy by citing Kennedy's positive attitude towards the Mercury astronauts, who Kennedy refers to as the Knights Errant of the New Frontier. Warland also compares the crew of the Enterprise to the Mercury astronauts and the Green Berets, each of whom acts as an analog to the Knights of Camelot. Kirk employs a brain trust of intellectual advisors, similarly to Kennedy and Franklin D. Roosevelt before him. Warland explains that the stereotype of Star Trek fandom as a refuge for nerds is in one sense easy to explain. This is one of the rare forms of popular culture in which the intellectuals are heroic, effectual, and sexy. Kirk, like Kennedy, oversees a potent combination of the worlds of ideas and power at work in the interests of the Republic, or here the Federation. Here, Warland and other authors solidify the connection between the liberal Cold War ethos, with its nearly unassailable confidence, with Trek's optimistic view of the future. As for how the consequences of American foreign policy influenced the show, H. Bruce Franklin's essay, Star Trek in the Vietnam Era, provides a rather insightful view on how events in the original series paralleled the course of the Vietnam War and concurrent anti-war movement. According to Franklin, the original series parabolically displaced the Vietnam War in time and space in order to confront the ethical implications of unilateral military escalation. But even within Trek's realm of exploration of the Cold War proxy conflict, its attitudes towards military intervention in foreign affairs changes drastically. Take, for example, the episode City on the Edge of Forever. In the episode, Dr. McCoy stumbles through a time portal that lands him in 1930s New York City. While there, McCoy saves a woman named Edith Keeler from dying in a car accident. In doing so, McCoy inadvertently causes Nazi Germany to win the Second World War, a grand demonstration of the butterfly effect, if not an exaggerated one. When Kirk and Spock travel back in time to retrieve McCoy, they must prevent him from saving Keeler, for if she survives, she will become the leader of a peace movement that keeps the U.S. from intervening in the war. Franklin writes, in the episode as it aired in 1967, Spock's speculation that Keeler's pacifist philosophy might have spread, changing the outcome of World War II, has been turned into a major plot element that viewers could hardly fail to relate to the growing movement against the Vietnam War. Franklin continues that Keeler is not portrayed as contemptible or ridiculous, and that the peace movement, no matter how noble, alluring, and idealistic in its motivation, might pose a danger to the progressive course of history. Kirk and Spock's intervention to correct history is presented similarly to the United States' mission to defeat communism in Southeast Asia, just as it had defeated Nazism 2 decades prior. Another episode of the original series, A Private Little War, features a planet where a society of hill people, an analog to the U.S. view of the South Vietnamese, is being attacked by armed villagers, an analog to the U.S. view of the North Vietnamese. The villagers have been armed by the Klingon Empire, Star Trek's analog to the Soviet Union and/or Communist China. Interestingly, Kirk and McCoy engage in a back and forth as to whether to intervene. Kirk suggests that the Federation arm the Hill people to achieve a balance of power, while McCoy voices his skepticism as to the viability of this solution, directly citing the waste of resources poured into Vietnam just for the South Vietnamese to lose. The third episode, directly relevant to Vietnam, The Omega Glory, takes an even more non-interventionist stance when the Enterprise encounters a planet inhabited by two warring factions, the effectively communist Combs and the effectively anti-communist Yangs. The crew discovers the Yangs worship a tattered U.S. flag and have a constitution. Kirk teaches the Yangs that their constitution is meant for everybody, which Franklin likens to paradoxically preaching a message of globalism. This dramatic transition from embracing Johnson-esque policies to wholeheartedly opposing them in the span of less than a year allows viewers to witness the translation of America's anti-war consciousness onto the small screen. Further down the road, as the spin-off series Deep Space Nine began a regular war arc in its 6th season, there was division among the writing staff as to how to approach the topic. Producer Rick Berman echoed a sentiment shared by Majel Barrett, wife of Gene Roddenberry, that Roddenberry would have hated the arc, with Berman criticizing the depressing and violent stories. In a 1999 AOL chat with DS9 writer Ronald D. Moore, Moore concedes that it would have been very hard to argue Gene into going this way, due to Roddenberry's pacifist ideals, but I don't think he was always right. The Dominion War has been one of the better storylines we've come up with, whether Gene would have agreed or not. This dissonance between the original articulated version of Trek, present all the way from the original series to The Next Generation, which Roddenberry also executive produced, and the darker, grittier tone of Deep Space Nine, comparatively speaking, illustrates the changing conditions of how Americans responded to war during the late 20th century. Indeed, the public largely went from embracing rather anti-war sentiments during the Vietnam era to embracing the Realpolitik solutions of the Reagan and Bush eras. The Dominion War arc hence provides a level of excitement to the show, exploring ethical dilemmas by pitting characters in uneasy alliances against a common enemy. Moore thus asserts that he would have still argued for doing the Dominion War, and if he'd rejected it, I would have thought he was wrong. This level of Realpolitik is also present throughout the run of Star Trek Enterprise, the show's temporal Cold War arc, launched in the pilot episode and concluding in the Season 3 finale, arguably takes the tradition of incorporating militaristic themes and elements into Star Trek to the next level by providing the prequel Enterprise crew with obstacles in the form of alien proxy agents, such as the terroristic Suliban. The arc revitalizes the espionage factor of Cold War hysteria and combines it with contemporary domestic security concerns. The implications of this theme are explored no better than in the Xindi story arc. The Xindi, created at the behest of Paramount to boost Enterprise's ratings for its 3rd season, are a confederation of 5 species who construct a superweapon designed to kill civilians on Earth, mirroring the then-recent September 11th attacks. The event, which launches a sort of war on terror by Starfleet, reflects the Xindi's arrangement as an analog for Al-Qaeda, or even the Mujahideen, as the Xindi are guided by another powerful race against Earth, just as the United States mobilized Sunni Afghans against the Soviet Union. The 90-minute documentary, Star Trek Enterprise in a Time of War, released for the Enterprise Season 3 Blu-ray disc, describes the set of events that led to the creation of the Xindi arc. In the segment entitled Call to Arms, director David Livingston comments that the Xindi were destroying parts of Earth, so it was reflective of what was going on at the time. The Xindi represent yet another shift in how Star Trek treats war that in some ways echoes the original ethos present in City on the Edge of Forever and A Private Little War. Intervention and a balance of power is the only way to ensure survival. The temporal Cold War effectively blurs the line between the defensive nature of the Dominion War and the more offensive nature of the various Vietnam analogs in the original series. This blurred line is extended even further in each of the installments of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek reboot trilogy, which often reference Enterprise and feature war on terror elements in their storylines. Just as American foreign policy in the 21st century has encouraged Americans to be critical of their government's actions, Enterprise's Xindi arc challenges viewers to consider the ethical implications of engaging in violent warfare with alien races and evokes the age-old question, who started it first? Star Trek has existed in one form or another for over half a century. In that time, the way each installment approaches various social and ethical issues has been profoundly influenced by the events of the day. Trek presents a future that, while progressive in both the ostensive sense and arguably through its substance, has been crafted as the result of various forces and pressures that have marked every decade since the tumultuous 1960s. As the franchise marches on into the 21st century, the creators' collectively articulated vision of how humans and non-humans will interact hundreds of years from now will certainly continue to change. Thank you all so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to leave a thumbs up down below. I'm definitely interested to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you want to support my content, becoming a patron or member is a great way to do so. Those links, as well as my social media and merch site, are in the description. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to receive all notifications. I'll see you in the next video. Live long and prosper.